Esam gatavi? Dear ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, hello. My name is Andris Sprūds and I am a director of Latvia Institute of International Affairs and professor in Rīgas Tradiņš University. And it is my pleasure to be here, and I am very glad to see you in this discussion regarding NATO's strategic directions and development and challenges and interests of Latvia. Russian forces are allocated at the border of Ukraine, and this reminds us of how important the security is provided by NATO and how important it is for Latvia to be part of the alliance. NATO has had a major role in facilitating security in the region, and Latvia has gained a lot. And the presence of armed forces shows us the solidarity after aggression of Russia in Ukraine. Latvia also participates in missions, also complies with 2% from GDP criteria, and participates in strategic discussions. So Latvia is also contributing to the alliance. Now, the fact that we have Deputy Secretary General from Latvia, Ms. Braže, also means that we are a somewhat major force also in strategic discussions. 30 countries. For 30 countries to agree between themselves, it is difficult, and NATO 2030 seeks the opportunities to agree and also solutions to existing problems. And we are going to touch upon a wide variety of questions today, and security measures is an important topic. So, involvement of the society is necessary, not just politicians discussing these issues somewhere, and the people must be aware of and must be convinced that we are working towards the development. And I believe that we also welcome this contribution from the society. So, definitely, the security, the defense questions of the whole of the state and alliance are going to be ever more wider. And the solutions cannot be otherwise found without the solidarity and partnership. So, once again, I would like to welcome and thank all the participants, especially Ms. Baiba Braže for involvement and participation. So here I will stop with introductions and I will give floor and moderation to my colleague, Mr. Vargulis, and I wish you fruitful discussions, keeping in mind Latvia's role in this alliance, which is which provides us with security. Thank you, Mr. Sprūds, for introductory words, which already shows us what is going to be the scope of questions we are discussing about with the professionals. And my name is Mārtiņš Vargulis, and I'm a researcher of Latvia Institute of International Affairs, and I would like to add that the aim of the discussion conceptually is that since 2010, when NATO approved the concept, still in force, binding strategic document, how the alliance is viewing different challenges, And since then, the security environment has changed. It has become multidimensional. And the alliance is challenged from various directions, in various ways, and we have seen not only military challenges but also pandemics, health security, energy, cyber attacks, etc. And all these factors are playing ever more significant role in our well-being and feeling secure. In such context, it is also important to take into consideration Latvian interests and the position of Latvia, and it is important to represent them on the level of NATO, of the whole alliance. And the adoption process is going to influence how Latvia and the region of the Baltics, how secure it is. Currently, I see we have security experts, professionals closely related to security topics. So, first of all, Deputy Secretary General in Diplomacy questions, Ms. Baiba Braža. I hope the communication channel works fine and you hear us well. I'm glad to see. Also, Ministry of Defense State Secretary Jānis Garisons is here with us. Hello. And former ambassador and senior researcher of Latvia Institute of International Affairs, Mr. Imants Liedis, and finally, representative of Reserve Captain Mr. Mārtiņš Vērdiņš. Thank you all for participating and connecting to the discussion, and for questions I would ask you to use the Slido with the code NATO 2030, or please scan the code which you can see in the upper corner. And first I'd like to begin with Ms. Braža. Considering your position, high position in NATO, and being present in decision-making, could you please provide us with what is this NATO 2030 adoption process and which are the most critical challenges we face in this context, and maybe could you give us an overview in mid-term how this process is going to develop? I give floor to you. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and calling, and thank you Latvia Institute of International Affairs for the series of online events where we are discussing Latvia, NATO, security. It is substantial for our nation. It's one of the priorities, and as Secretary General has always said, that security is the precondition of development. So this is what unites our NATO. We know NATO is politically military alliance, and it is the most powerful in the world, and since its foundation it's adopted, it's changed, allowing countries to unite. Currently 30 participants since North Macedonia joining last year, and we know that several more countries awaiting their admission. So in so many various ways we know what is NATO and what is its essence and how many dimensions, different dimensions it has. And as you said, Mārtiņš, the strategic environment changes have occurred, which not only in reaction of the events in Ukraine in 2014, but also in other regions, and due to other value shifts in the world, the technological development, the disruptive technology development, climate change. This has all and development of new arms. This has all facilitated the shift and the strategic competition, which is currently the environment we live in, of course, for democratic nations and nations participating in NATO, which have given this promise to protect each other, which is this adoption, and such adoption is necessary also in the future. So this process of change, called NATO 2030, it is an umbrella term, of course, because the process of change is not going to be only until 2030 or to reach some objectives for until 2030. We are definitely going to have to face more challenges after that too, and all 30 countries are working closely together for the NATO summit to be held in June and the necessary decisions made then. And this is going to happen in 3 directions. It is to make NATO more military efficient and also develop the global awareness and more involvement into the politics. So the alliance must become more global, and for that we need to look back at what had been done, what other measures measures we can take, various plans we can develop, and it is also related to how the technology influences our possibilities and military needs. So all the topics related to emerging technologies and also their transportation when necessary. So absolutely everything, starting from this deterrence policy to technology. And it all influences both our society, because the most realistic threat arises from various hybrid threats, not only military, involving the reaction with Clause 5 of the agreement, and individually and in smaller groups we need to understand what has to be done when we are threatened in the cyber environment, if we have informational attacks, and each state has to find solutions for this. Currently we don't have a single united solution and counteraction, and all this process has to be aligned and coordinated between the between the public sectors and state administration. This is the most important task for us. The more united politically, and NATO has influence. It has got this recommendation power in politics, and this again raises awareness between 30 countries. What is the most important politically for our alliance? And through the political consulting process, the transatlantic link remains strong. Also what is related to awareness of the threats and single awareness of the ongoing events in the world, and that raises the unity and the awareness and cohesion for us, not only to be a military alliance but also to see political decisions made harmonized. And if we're talking about this global approach and I'm calling it global approach not because we are intended to allocate forces, deploy forces in some remote places, but nevertheless, the threats don't have borders anymore in today's world, and it is a challenge for the democracy in the world to continue our development model, and the partnership with the European Union and other democratic states all over the world is of utmost significance currently. And here various models are involved. We're not talking about one box of topics in this partnership. There are various dimensions, trainings of armed forces, and international experience exchange in deterrence or measures taken in relation to the fifth clause, and of course with our partners both in Australia and elsewhere, we have been working closely together on these topics. So the partnerships are global, and we are all aware that China is not posing only opportunities but also challenges, how it develops and how they have different values, which again is the topic of political development and how all the alliance views China. On the 14th of June, this will end with the summit, NATO summit, and Mārtiņš also mentioned the strategic concept. We do believe that the NATO strategic concept has to be developed and reflect all the geopolitical changes and competition currently ongoing, to be aware of the security environment in the world, and most probably in 2022 we will see that the modernization process is going to finalize and new strategy is going to be implemented. And for all the Baltic states and northern states, their contribution will be very important. Thank you. This is what I wanted to say. Thank you for this introduction and overview on NATO 2030 and how it is going to develop. But now I will ask you a question, being moderator, and ask you additional question. Going back to when we developed this strategy, we had the group in Secretary General's office, and the group provided their opinions on how NATO has to develop in the future. And compared to that approach then and this one, we see that there are no participants from the Baltic states, which caused some which resonated and which was heard. But so I would like to ask you, coming back to your position in the alliance and your view from the outside, how successful is representation of Latvia's interest in the alliance? How successful we've been.
Most possibly this question shouldn't be addressed only to me. Also, it is very well felt in Latvia how in the current decision-making is satisfying for Latvia. So in this situation, I am more representative of NATO instead of Latvia. And of course, it wasn't easy when I started this work. So I needed to find this new focus. But I have to remember that Of course, Latvians are very good coordinators. They know their interests very well, and they are very professionals. And what I see in the council, I see that the formulations are very precise. They consult the other 30 member states because the consensus is needed for decision making. And Latvian representatives know how to justify their interests and also how to search and seek for support from other countries. And of course, there are several levels for everything, and of course, prioritization is very important because always to get everything what you want, it's not possible for any country. So I understand it will be very important to understand what are the priorities for short term, middle term, and long term, and what we want to achieve and attain as a member state. So, irrespectively which area it is, up to today's technologies or understanding of threats and deterring or flexibility and endurance of the public and also unity of the public. Um, I believe that all that will be very important for Latvia to understand. So, which decisions and what focus is the most important for us. Thank you, Mrs. Braja, for this open position. And I would like viewers to ask and to use this opportunity to use platform Slido and ask questions. And you can also ask them to Mrs. Braja because she will have to leave us earlier because she is participating in another NATO meeting. But right now I would like to ask a question to you, Mr. Garrison. So, what about representing these interests of Latvia and the Baltic states? So, what in NATO 2030 adaptation process are the main national interests, challenges, and also Latvia's position? Hello again. Thank you very much for inviting me to this discussion. And I think Mrs. Braja said very correctly that you shouldn't be always attacking trenches. Sometimes it is important also to step back in order to get a bigger victory. So I believe what we see right now is that the world is changing, and of course in those changes Latvia and the Baltic states are standing in the forefront, and we feel those changes the first ones, and then very often we are the ones who bring them to the rest of the alliance. So therefore our trust ratio is quite high, and very often people don't like that afterwards they are reminded we already said. But with us it has happened that we have said some things and then those things later happen. So therefore others are listening to our arguments, and they see that we are serious and we are able to predict things. And so we are moving towards the decentralization of the world, where the regional powers will play more and more important role, and economic theory, which was governing and ruling before, understanding that you can achieve everything with the economy, it is not working anymore. We are returning to the real policy world, where military power will play a very important role. And I believe that one of the NATO large conceptual values is that NATO could accept those changes in the new concept. There are several discussions, and of course democracies have to be able to protect themselves. There should be enough military force. This is, even without thinking, it has to be strengthened, and I believe this is the most essential thing, which at the global level I would like to see. If we talk about the regional level, um, uh, the interests of the Baltic states. So it is important that NATO continues strengthening the deterrence policy. I believe this is the most important. And if we are in our geographic situation, we don't want to start the war. We just are here, NATO is here, and giving signals to any potential aggressor that any military activities would cost a lot, but of course that is expensive. But next question is about finances. We do everything possible from our side, but we see that many European countries are not spending enough money on this military. And of course, we can try to think how we will share and how we can do something. But I would like to say honestly, I have understand that don't try to pretend that you don't understand. Everything costs something. If we want to be serious, we have to understand that this security costs something. And if we talk about our situation, what is important for us? The presence of NATO is important, ability to react and an ability to make decisions. Because one is ability to see the potential threat and react in timely manner, because in Ukraine when we saw it we are like, oh, we are too late. So that's why we have to create a system, and this system has improved significantly, and we are in a much better position in comparison with 2014. But in any way we have to remember the mistakes and not make them anymore, because in the future those mistakes can cost us much more. And also abilities to react, because only the presence, NATO presence, wouldn't assure everything if there wouldn't be forces which are able to come in a short notice for strengthening. And that is important for our national interests, starting with early warning systems and making decisions. Also, political decisions have to be taken very fast. We shouldn't be discussing for hours, and the presence and also the possible additional forces which come to us to help. So those are the things which are important for us. Although, if we compare where we were in 2014 and 15, we can see that we have made a great progress. We have the multinational division, the North, which is one of the essential command management elements, and it also creates the cooperation between Latvia and Estonia, and also we have this united operational zone. Many things happen and have happened, but we have to look in the future, and those challenges are becoming even more. And by that, I would like to finish my introductory speech. Thank you very much for this introduction, and I will use this opportunity. I have an additional question. So first, about this common vision. So the situation in Ukraine in 2014 and also the situation right now, what we see at the borders of Ukraine and also close to the borders of the Baltic states. So do you see that we have a common understanding what is the threat to our security? And this would be one aspect. And second, we must admit that the defense sector during the last few years have implemented several policies, starting with the Baltic state defense and training, and also there were large procurements for the armed forces. So are those activities, these initiatives, these policies, are they in context with adaptation process, with the idea how would NATO look like after 10 years? And would our allies appreciate it. Okay, I would like to start with the first question about unity of opinions, common opinions. We have to take into account that each country geographically have their own interests, but in general you can also see in the policy that the fact that in Latvia, in the battle group, there are almost 10 countries represented. So this is a signal about political support, and that also there is an awareness and understanding about the situation. And it is common in this region. But of course, we should understand that countries will never have identical interests. And also, it is important that we can get support to our most vital interests. And talking about our own initiatives, I would like to refer to what I said in the beginning, that in some areas we are pioneers who are trying out many things. For example, this comprehensive defense of the country. I believe that some countries are not only now thinking about it. For example, the UK. In the last review, I can see that there is also an idea to pay attention to the comprehensive defense of the country. So therefore, I would like to say that those things are in the context. And what does NATO consist of? NATO consists of the member states. So if there are no member states, there is no NATO army. There are member states and they participate. So NATO is as strong as army of each separate country. So if we are stronger, then NATO will be stronger. And I believe that we have to be based on this theory. And also, if we do not protect ourselves, then also NATO or anyone else wouldn't do it if we are not ready to protect ourselves. Thank you very much for this opinion. Mr. Liedis, I would like to continue with you. So, from Latvian perspective to this geopolitical transatlantic direction. So, last 4 years, during the previous US administration, have created also some problems within NATO, and it was also and it also gave an idea to invest more, especially between the European member states. So, when you are looking at this process of adaptation 2030, so how those transatlantic ties and links will continue developing, and what is the role of the US in the Baltic region? Thank you very much, colleagues. I am so happy to be together with my colleagues. So, looking at the transatlantic ties, I would like to continue what Mrs. Baiba said already, that NATO 2030 global approach deals with that, because, of course, without no doubt, if we look at the situation between the large powers, so I would like to look at the US, China, and Russia. And I believe that those three countries and their relationships are going to become more and more important for our security. And if we talk about transatlantic ties and how it relates to China, it is very important to look at the dynamics which are between the US and China. In The Economist recently, we read that the most dangerous place in the world is Taiwan. So for us is the situation that the US or this transatlantic tie has softened is very dangerous for us. So if this tie is not very strong, if the US is forced to pay attention to the happenings in the Asia and Middle East, then it means that we ourselves also have to pay attention to the situation in that region. And here also comes another thing, Russia, factor of Russia. A couple of months ago, there was a meeting between the foreign affairs ministers of China and Russia. It was on the 23rd of March. And what happened afterwards? First of all, since 2014, the Russian army didn't increase their forces at Ukraine, but after this meeting it happened. And then there were also air forces and naval forces training close to Taiwan, the China side. So all that happened after that meeting. So there is a question. Would this aggressive action from Russia and also from China, it was coordinated or it was just a coincidence? And so what happens if the US has to deal with the situation with the far southern China region, and does it weaken involvement of the US in Europe, which we care the most about? So therefore, it is very essential for us from Latvian side to look at those situations in those places. And I believe that the NATO group, which reported to the alliance before Christmas, they paid attention to China. And for alliance, it is very important to spend more time and more human resources analyzing the situation in China. And also, there should be more action related to China. And I believe this is very important that NATO strategically look at this region. And I also understand that there is another issue on the agenda. It is about NATO summit together with Asia in 2022, and that could be one action and one example for what I spoke about. And also it is important, if we continue the idea that we should globally look more globally, then NATO is a possibility to get involved more and to cooperate with Australia, New Zealand, and those armed forces are already participating in the military operations in Afghanistan, and also the Southern Korea, and also Japan. So from the point of view of Latvia, I believe if we look at the transatlantic ties and our need to make sure that US is involved in the security of Europe, then first of all, we have to continue to prove to the US that Latvia is an ally, and Latvia is a country that can be trusted by the US. And of course, that is together with Lithuania and Estonia and also with Poland. And then I believe that it is also very important when we talk to the US, it is important to promote this common understanding that China is the biggest strategic external enemy or external challenge. And in not only that, but for Europe, Russia is posing the greatest threat for European security. So if we look at the next strategic concept, then it is very important for the NATO to continue growing into an alliance which is all the time adapting to the future threats. So like that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Imants. And I would like to continue. And there is this additional question about these transatlantic ties and the European dimension. So with the previous US administration, the question about European strategic autonomy was intensified, and for Latvia and for the Baltics, sometimes we have different opinions, and it is totally different from the opinion of the Central Europe and Southern Europe countries. So how do you see this development in context with the NATO 2030 adaptation process? I feel that this question about strategic autonomy, this topicality has reduced in Europe right now. From France, France was the main initiator for this. Of course, in any way, the European Union is operating its strategic compass, but at the same time, it is very important to remember that there is an interaction between NATO and the European Union, or maybe between the European Union and US and Canada and Norway. And for us, it's a very important question about military mobility. Therefore, it is very good that just in recent days, the European Union agreed to allow to also add the US, Canada, and Norway to this mobility process. So I believe that those contradictions between the European security and NATO, they have been reduced a little bit. Thank you very much.
A question to you, maybe more related with the military perspective, and previously we discussed, and the colleagues' opinion was that given different events in the security environment for NATO, NATO has become closer to the regions, and there are the groups constantly ready, and the funding has increased, and the changes in the security environment have occurred, and given what we've heard from the colleagues. Now, what do you believe from NATO perspective? What are the measures we need to implement for NATO in 10 years to remain the strongest military organization in the international arena? Yes, thank you. I will say not from my own perspective so much, but over the last 8 years, I've had an opportunity to monitor the opinion of society regarding the questions you asked, and I saw that, and which also is linked with what we are talking about today, that these large and ambitious questions, and Secretary General in his speech commenting NATO 2030 principal idea, he said that it is an ambitious program of the alliance. So here, one of the most ambitious questions is the Washington Agreement, fifth paragraph interpretation, taking into consideration the fact that the text of this fifth paragraph is formalized in 1949, which even back then was the result of strong compromise. and reflecting the situation after the Second World War and concentration of nuclear arms and weapons. Given the current situation, we need to understand that it does not correspond with threats and challenges of current moment. And here Madame Brage also mentioned that we have different gray zone conflicts or undercover conflicts ongoing, which seemingly do not fall under the interpretation of paragraph 5, activating the alliance countermeasures, but for each of the situations that would ask and require more time, which is crucial, especially for us, for little nations like Latvia. And these are the signals. Here it is important to hear these signals from other participants of the alliance, from the United States of America. What is our interpretation of paragraph 5, and does it comply with interpretation of the rest of the alliance? And also, in the informative bubble I reside, we have this major question currently being asked, whether or not we should have a revised paragraph 5. And it seems, from the perspective of the outsider, of the viewer, it seems that this problem is being avoided in public discussions and in academic discussions, and maybe it is because these discussions, we're talking about Russia probably, and it is not clear how maybe what is the new revision of paragraph 5 would look like, and would it be a deterrence measure in itself? However, again, I would like to note that we cannot go on like that forever, and the interpretation of paragraph 5 is one of the moments which will be crucial to our further development, because we always need to be prepared for plan B when the situation is critical. At the same time, when we're talking about the definition of the gray zone, not directly falling under the criteria of paragraph 5. And so we need to be aware how our allies are going to react and how quickly we can receive their support. Understanding the situation currently at hand, we need to ask this very crucial question, whether the discussions are even ongoing, whether these questions are going to be asked, or everything's fine. So, if we decide that the discussion is not necessary, we can say that this is our perspective and we develop our capabilities, take into consideration the plan B. From the military perspective in the Baltic states, not only in Latvia, what we are talking about, and openly and very much, is that it is linked with the forces of, with the reactive forces, or are we talking about development of our own capabilities? Both these questions have to be asked, and they are legitimate questions. So both capabilities must be developed. Rapid reaction and rapid response, and also our own military capabilities. And we also need to understand that military is the same in Latvia and in our Western allies. So capabilities of training are equal. What is different is the materially technical equipment, devices, comprehensive technology. So our allies have some, we don't have all of it. We are attempting and trying what we can do to purchase them, and yet we need to remember this is not a quick process, but the situation must be improved quick indeed. And the rapid response unit, and as it seems now, their increase is not possible anymore. Maybe there are some nuances how they can be strengthened, or maybe be present here in different configurations. Nevertheless, they are remaining in this amount as they are here currently. And if we're talking about the further development, future development, and considering how the Baltic states can solve the defense issues related, as their capabilities are limited in purchasing the necessary equipment, why are we not speaking about the alliance creating a fund, material technical pool of funding, and maybe lending, and not selling the equipment, but lending the equipment, and with the condition that in case of necessity we can use it and we can train with it, but then as we go further in our funding and accrue more funding, we pay for and buy out the equipment. Military mobility problem already mentioned. One thing is moving, in case of conflict, the equipment and military staff over the Baltic states, but the other thing is creating these storage points in times of peace. I think that we would mitigate the problem and it would be non-existent if we develop these capabilities of and develop our mobility. Once again, in the Baltic states, we need the structure, a single united structure compliant with NATO standards, with personnel from the Baltic states, and the missing equipment capabilities and arms capabilities are then the limitations thereof are mitigated with lended resource. We're not hearing any responses regarding these questions, but we are listening and hearing about the military mobility and rapid response. 14 states in Europe. Yesterday's news is that they decided and united with the aim to create rapid response units and groups. It's something fresh, something new, and how is this going to be integrated in NATO, or how it's going to cooperate with NATO forces? This is interesting. And what Madame Brage also mentioned is the issue we're not looking at enough is the disruptive technologies. I'm not sure how to call them in Latvian. This technology means that certain states in the alliance will have the technology in place and will be able to use it. And again, we're speaking about how the states with lesser development are going to be able to enjoy the benefits they provide. Because otherwise, we need to be aware of that the progress is never in standstill. So it's not ongoing only in the West, and these disruptive technologies are going to be used not only in the West but also in the East, and their armies and the military forces are going to be using the progressive technologies. And this is the question: how armies of the Baltic states, how can they enjoy the benefits and equalize the capabilities between us and potential enemies? This is one of the biggest problems, which I hope in June in NATO summit it is going to be discussed. However, here in our national bubble, this problem seems topical. What we are building is maybe compliant with 20th century army, but we need to build 21st century military forces. Madame Brage, as you are leaving, the question from the audience about the deterrence. And in the context of NATO, the discussions are ongoing that this is not only military dimension, but public communication, informational operations, cyber environment, etc. What are these most important priorities for each of the member states and for the alliance to be more resistant to threats in newly created dimensions? I think we've just heard a very interesting lecture. Very briefly from my part, I would like to say, because I need to go to the meeting, of course, there is a variety of measures, be it telecommunication technologies, submerged wires, communication means, informational cyber attacks. There is no one answer. There's a toolbox, the menu, which the NATO alliance knows and each state, member state knows. And the deterrence and resistance capability grows with the growing community awareness of these threats. The cyber environment, social network platforms and algorithms used for artificial intelligence development, and again, be it telecommunication, property rights, infrastructures, infrastructure on the street. Different states have different strategies and solutions to the problems. While preparing for summit, we have discussed the common objectives of this resilience and the deterrence and capability of monitoring and the implementation. I don't think it is going to be just to say, quote unquote, it's good we have something in place in this topic, but I think we are going to have particular measures decided upon how to improve society's resilience. It is definitely also communication improvement and state institution communication with their citizens, mutual trust, values, so many topics surrounding and this one umbrella term is never going to be going away from the agenda. Information storage, communication channels, this is all encompassing and the source of information, be it journalists, non-governmental organizations, state administrations, for everyone, collectively and individually. How do we say, what do we say, how do we communicate, and how we influence other people, and how do we contribute for this threat not to increase. It is like blockchain society, not just one single central channel, but we have so many sources of information, and they have to work in a coordinated manner. There is no doubt regarding the fact that we have common values and we have this common truth and one truth for all the alliance. Thank you once again. So this is why, especially, I would like to say thank you to the Latvia Institute of International Affairs for your efforts in informing the society and uniting us. Thank you for warm words and thank you for participating in the discussion. But now I understand you have to leave to NATO meeting. We have more questions from the audience. Mr. Garrison, I think this is a question to you.
Šobrīd un kā aizsardzības ministrija koordinē sadarbību ar citām institūcijām un sabiedrību, lai veidotu visaptverošo valsts
between the institution and the society to create this.
Yes, we are doing it in different levels. Since 2013, we have a regular training, which is organized at several levels, also training for the government, and that helps to improve the situation that experts are preparing the government. And also the latest highlight was also the government played with specific situations, and we also in the some last times we ran to evacuate the government and ensure that it continues working. And what makes me happy is that if we compare with the situation in 2014, when it was just very general training, right now this training is very specific, very detailed actions, and also at the level of the government we are solving very practical issues. And then the second level is this interinstitutional cooperation, which happens on a daily basis, and each ministry has to develop their own action plans. And the third level, which turned out to be one of the most successful, is cooperation with the private sector and NGOs. And during the last 2 years, we have organized trainings with organizations of critical institutions, also NGOs and churches, and I must say that I'm very happy for the interest and also participation from the private sector. We have felt that they were very interested, and we are continuing this cooperation, and we plan to continue it. That we are working practically. We are not creating new documents just for the sake of documents, but we practically cooperate. And I would like also to react to what Martin Švediņš said. I believe that this is so typical for us that we are not very high opinions about us, and we are telling that in other places it's better. But in reality, if we look at the 5G and new technologies, then we can say that we are one of the leading in this area. And also maybe you have noticed that in cooperation with LMT, we have developed this area. This is one of the first projects in the whole alliance about using 5G network for military needs. So I wouldn't speak so lowly about what we are doing. If we talk about high technologies for the military, of course that cannot be developed with mandatory military service, but we have discussed about displacement of equipment here, but you have to understand there is only one country where there is this equipment. The rest of the countries have sold out this equipment already some time ago, so there is only one country which still has it. And I would be happy if somebody would lend us this equipment, but there is no one to do it. Nobody has it. And if we are speaking and saying that we are so underdeveloped and so on, but just look at the battalions in other countries with all the equipment and everything. We have to compare their battalion and ours, because this is a discussion. Is it enough with one elite group task force, or we have to make sure that the whole army is developing and there is equipment which can be operated also by not only the army but also by other forces here. So is it it's a strategic discussion. Should we buy one piece of equipment which costs several million or 10 million one piece and just have it, or we just try to develop and improve all this technical equipment for all the army? So this is a discussion that we have to discuss about it. Yes, thank you very much. And considering what you said about Article 5 and this discussion, potential discussion, and the threshold and activities which are covered by this Article number 5, and also considering what Mr. Garrison just said. So how correct or how ambitious is adjustment of Latvia? So we as a borderline country, and looking at the development context, so how able we are to withstand for a certain period of time. I wouldn't want to argue that since 2014 we have made huge steps and we have started the progress and it continues, but the question still is how fast we will get the target which we have set ahead of us, and unfortunately the possibilities we have, that's what we have, and this way and this progress and process is long and will be, and these abilities we needed already yesterday, and we will need it this summer, because the training from Zapad, which is going to happen in September, in autumn, right now we are discussing about 2030, and this is like time scale, and during this time, by 2030, there will be 4 more trainings, Zapad trainings, and in that side there are 70 to 100,000 soldiers exercising on the other side, and in any moment this operation, which is called the training, can turn out into something else. And so just also if we think about what happened in Ukraine in spring, so it was first of all disguised as training, and is it really training? So there is still this issue, and we have to achieve this level of abilities to be able to do this self-defense, and this is still an issue.
Atgriežamies tajā NATO diskusiju kontekstā, un tā kā jūs, Leģikungs, pieminējāt Ķīnu.
And if we return to this context of NATO discussions, you spoke about China. There is a question from the viewers about China. So what threat China pose to Latvia's security? And also additional question from my side. So considering the potential change of focus from Russia to China and emerging and growing role of China, so would Latvia's security is situation is getting worse or not? First question, is China a threat to Latvia's security? If we look at the international situation, then the largest threat for us still comes and is posed by our neighbors, Russia. But if we look globally, then yes, we could say that there are some health threats, security threats. So the recent situation was caused by China. The world in this global age is so closely connected, and we also felt the consequences from the situation and the events in China. But I would like to say that if we need to choose between the US and China, then the last year has showed that, of course, obviously we have chosen the US and our position in talking about 5G, where we, together with other NATO countries, supported the US position, talking about Huawei. So my biggest concern is that the US and transatlantic ties are weakened by the fact that the US was involved with China, and US attention is drawn to the situation in Asia and also the region of the Pacific Ocean. So for us, it is still important that European countries and NATO are strengthening their defense possibilities, strengthening their defense. And also, like it was said, there are some member states which do not commit financially enough for the proper defense. So we have to look at the specific positions of the country. So, for example, in Germany, the leadership is changing. Also, there will be the elections of president in France next year. So it means that the situation and the government and leaders are changing in the large European countries, and that will also impact the relationship with the US. Also, we have several questions about military development in Latvia. So I believe that in this context is no possible not to discuss about this mandatory military service, mandatory conscription. So I will ask, what about the land guards in Latvia and this model, how active it is. We have 8,030 persons in Latvia, and I believe that this model is able to continue, and we will also link this model together with the defense training, and Since 2024, it will be a mandatory subject at school, and also we believe that 2,000 to 3,000 young people could participate in summer camps, and that could be also a good basement for having those people. And I believe that if we talk about these reserve soldiers, those who have ended the military service, they are not required to go to training every day. After the process of training, we are motivating our people to do this training, but this training is more active in the beginning, and so they are retrained like several times a year, but not more. And this is the system which we also have in this mandatory conscription model. So this division into several groups, it has happened, and they will have this regular training. So also the question goes to you. About this mandatory conscription. Is it necessary considering the challenges we are facing? We could have a separate discussion just about that, but taking into the consideration the time limits. I'm not talking about National Guard. So the serious experts in the world are saying that the National Guard is just for guards are just for the reserve. I'm talking in general, not for our. I'm talking about this mandatory conscription or type of it. It allows the country to place in reserve a certain amount of young people who are equally trained, and then they can have a retraining, and we don't have this reserve. So we have the number of these National Guards. I don't believe that there are 8,000. We could discuss about numbers, but let's not talk about the numbers. But there is a stable number of these National Guards, and probably this number is not going to change, not increase, or probably also not decrease. So this is a number which shows what is the readiness and willingness of the public of Latvia to be involved in the defense of the country. And second is, of course, this mandatory conscription, which would help us every year to have a certain number of young people in reserve, and also talking about this defense subject, which could be taught at schools. And if at schools this is demilitarized, this is survivor skills, but the military parts could be organized in those two camps, which are 2 times 10 days, and we have to understand that 20 days training doesn't qualify for the soldiers level. It means that there are several years to be spent to achieve the level which could be achieved in this mandatory conscription per 6 months. But the conclusion is that we don't have enough mobilization reserve. In Estonia, they have 60 to 90,000 which they could mobilize, and they have these reserve well-trained soldiers, but unfortunately for us, it's not like that. I wouldn't want this discussion to turn into the global context, but yes, please.
I will say briefly regarding the military training, and this is theory, orienteering, and well, let's not deceive the participants of the discussion and listeners. We have this first level training undergone in schools and higher education institutions, but you know, I have to count the funding and money we have. I can draw 60 and 90,000 of people, but please show me where is the funding, where we would receive the funding to fund 60,000 mobilized military personnel. Where are the arms, ammunition, the storage facilities? Where are they? This is approximately 500 million euros for ammunition. If we want them to fight naked, I mean, I wouldn't want to continue this discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, colleagues, for your insight into the topic. I think this is indeed topical issue, and we can return to this. But regarding the funding, I have one more question from the audience, and Mr. Liedis, regarding NATO and 2% of GDP allocation and the challenges of pandemics. What is the risk that this funding is going to be reduced, and what happens then? What are our challenges and problems in reaching that level of contribution? And I think this is a very good question. We have to look at each member state's budget, and of course we need to be aware of health care system requiring more funding in given situation. But we also see that there are funding capabilities from the European Union with special recovery funds. We're not talking about millions, we're talking about billions in that regard. So first of all, it is very important to maintain the 2% GDP contribution level, and I am sure Latvia is able to, and our security budget actually exceeds the 2-limit threshold, and I believe this is going to continue so in the Baltic states and in Poland. Nevertheless, each state will have a larger stress over the coming years on their healthcare system, and due to fight with pandemics in the world. I would also like to use the opportunity and what Mr. Verdinch mentioned about the grey zone and threats and paragraph 5. In my opinion, NATO has admitted that these are the problems, and over the last years the decisions have been made by member states deciding that cyber threat can be a criteria for activation of paragraph 5. Because the discussion was regarding what kind of grey zones we're speaking. Relatively speaking, I think this question has been already addressed between the member states. Thank you. This is all. I just wanted to comment. One more thing in the end I would like to discuss, and this is the lessons learned from operations in Afghanistan. What are the things we've learned as an organization, as member states, and what is our view in the future and security situation, not only in Afghanistan, but in the region as a whole? Mr. Garisons, maybe?
Nu, es domāju, tās mācības ir daudzas, ir tādas, kas, protams, ir vērtīgas arī mums, pielietojot valsts aizsardzībā, bet, protams, ir tādas arī, kas mums nedara, jo ņemot vērā geogrāfiju un pretinieku, tā situācija tomēr ir savādāk. Bet es domāju, ka tā lielā politiskā mācība tāda, kad, ja nav atbalsts vietējos iedzīvotājos, manuprāt, tad ir ļoti grūti noturēt šo te kontroli pār teritoriju un sākot iespējams, tas ir, teiksim, tas, kas notika Afganistānā un tas, kas notika Irākā, arī daļēji bija pretēji tā, kā tas notika, teiksim, Latvijā, kad sabruka Padomju Savienība, kad šīs te struktūras saglabājās un faktiski funkcionēja, bet Afganistānā, Irākā vienā vietā nebija vispār šīs te vietējās struktūras, otrā vietā savukārt tika iznīcinātas un izveidojas varas vakums. Un mēs faktiski redzam, ka šis te varas vakums nav iespējams, šo varas vakumu nav iespējams atjaunot ļoti laiku. Otra lieta, manuprāt, tas rebuild the structure.
For a very long time already. The second largest lesson was that the big forces being integrated and how they can communicate and work together. When we left Afghanistan, our battle forces and groups in the Baltic states, in Poland, we will have to continue integration of the forces, very important to joint operations. Otherwise, when we see militaries of different countries coming together, there is a problem in communication and being able to work together. Mr. Liedis? Yes, I think the largest lesson learned to Latvia from this was that we as a Latvia, we are an integrated partner of NATO. We are able to contribute into the common security. I must say, participation in operations in Afghanistan has had its toll, and 10 years ago when I was a minister, it was the most difficult time. It was accepting and waiting for
pateikties katram, teiksim, Latvijas karavīram, kas ir dienējis Afganistānā. Dabīgi, es domāju, tas ir no militārā viedokļa, kā Jānis Garisons norādīja, daudz ko devis, teiksim,
and I think, well, I wanted to say thank you to all the military and their participation in the real armed conflicts, and we are aware and we understand this price of it. The situation after the September 11th and the system in place since then, the latest events show that, well, there's not much positive outlook in the future. The situation in Afghanistan is ever more difficult. There are problems with introduction of democracy. education of girls in schools, this is ever more difficult and complex topic. But again, I think that the decision was made correctly. 20 years have passed, and USA and the allies, including Latvia, have done everything they could to fight the terrorism threat arising from Afghanistan. And I think that it definitely is so that since 2001 is not that major anymore. I think that we have soldiers fallen in this conflict, and we need to understand that soldiers are fighting for, they can lose their lives in these operations, and it is, and these missions are activated within the framework of the 5th paragraph, and this is the correct interpretation of paragraph 5, also reflecting that Latvia can be a reliable partner. From our perspective, Afghanistan, I think, is a real threat to also Russia, with jihadi moving to the north, using Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and other territories, and Russia will have to think about the southern direction, which gives us time to prepare, because from the south Russia is threatened, and the threat is real, contrary to the threat non-existent from the west. Thank you, colleagues. I wouldn't want to put full stop here. I would like to say it's a coma. In Latvia we have different opinions regarding the topic, which is only positive. The two publications you can find on our webpage or printed. If you communicate with us, we can send you over. And we are continuing the discussions on the topicalities, and most probably in 2022 we will have some decisions in place regarding the positioning of Latvia interests of Latvian society, and I think it is important, and also corridors of NATO. Thank you to all the participants, to the audience, and we'll see you soon.
Paldies. Paldies visiem.
Mēs esam ārpus tiešraides, ja? Jā. Tā kā mēs vairs neesam tiešraidē. Paldies, kolēģi, vēlreiz, jautri. Šķiet, ka bija arī produktīvi.
Mārtiņ, es neesmu pret obligāto dienestu. Es vienkārši skaitu naudu, saproti. Man tā ir problēma, ka es nevaru... Nerunāsim par obligāto dienestu. Es saprotu, ko jūs gribat tagad veidot. Jūs veidojat to BAM, bet nav pēc 2 nometnēm.